This is the Storypunks podcast, a show where we talk about all the punks. So steampunk, dieselpunk, cyberpunk, and all the other punks. I'm your host, Cindy Grigg. This is episode 28, and we are talking about Ecopunk and Solarpunk. This is part 2 of my conversation with Mary Woodbury. And so yes, if you missed last episode, you will want to start with that one, just so you have the context for this conversation. It was a wonderful beginning, and that would be episode 27. In this episode, we're going to continue with more resources and also some really cool insights about other works you definitely know, whether you've been into Solarpunk and Ecopunk or not. So tons of insight, tons to think about and to inform your projects. And as far as my projects, so every week I do an update, every episode I do an update. This is a bi-weekly show. And for this update, I just want to mention something that I neglected to mention last time. So it occurred to me I didn't share what I have been working on when it comes to Solarpunk and Ecopunk. And it's because in my series, The Salt Sheen Paradox, it comes quite a bit later in the story. So I've explained how this is a series that involves time travel. And each time my character goes to a different time period, she enters a different punked world. Because while it doesn't have to be the case that each punk is related to a specific time period, that is often the case. And that's how my story goes. So my character eventually gets to a time period where Solarpunk technologies and Ecopunk technology is pivotal to her next steps and to understanding the workings of these, fantastical salt sheen portals that are across the world's salt flats. And so it's something that is a little bit of a payoff down the line. But if anyone's writing this type of stuff and they want to see how I'm threading it in, even beginning in book 1, then feel free to check out my series. It is The Salt Sheen Paradox, and you can find that at cindygrigg.com. Currently, it is on pre-order, which means you can get the first book for a very discounted price, and so it's a way to jump in and see if it's your kind of thing. You know what else I forgot? I've been kind of spastic, apparently. I forgot to report on the episode that I did right before the last episode where I talked about conferences, and I was about to head to a conference. I gave my, for lack of a better term, best practices and ideas, and everything was wonderful. And we had so many cool discussions from so many different angles. And I loved being able to reference some of the discussions we've had on this show. The panels have helped me host this show, and then also this show is helping me now speak on panels. So everything feeds into everything, right? I hunted down the punks there, and I have so many cool people coming on the show. So to hear who is coming up and who you can submit a question for, you can just sign up for my newsletter. It's at storypunks.world/newsletter. And that's a cool way for you to expand the conversation. And I love the breadth that brings to these discussions on so many different topics relating to the punks. So again, that's how I notify you, through storypunks.world/newsletter. Okay, so without further ado, let's get right into the rest of this conversation with Mary Woodbury. We have so much cool Ecopunk and Solarpunk stuff to cover, and I know you're going to get a ton out of it. Here we go. Let's start with eco-fiction.com, because you've described it as a hobby, but then it's gathered, other people that help you with it, and you've seen it grow. So what can you tell us about the site, and also just your experience creating that site and running that site?
I actually started creating it after I wrote and published my novel, because I couldn't find too many other books like it. And when I started looking into it, there were actually quite a few. My book was first published as an ebook in 2012. And I think actually since then, we've seen tons more literature that covers these kinds of themes. But before then, really, if you look going back through human time, and as far as, in novels, that themes about the natural world are prominent in a lot of novels. And especially since probably the 60s or 70s, when climate change started becoming known and scientists started converging on, yes, global warming is happening, or that this will be a major concern, then we start seeing a few more stories. But I'd say just within the past decade or so, it's really picked up quite a bit. So this work is, when I started, I was going in kind of blind. Now I see with a lot of research, and I have like news, what do you call it? Like keyword set up in my news alerts so that I can find out what's happening. And there's just so many people working in this field. And I've talked to a lot of them. And so with authors, you can find what they're saying, which I think is really interesting because I'm really big on a huge perspective and diverse voices within this field. And so I talk to authors and post those interviews at the site. And right now I've been working on a couple ongoing series. One is women working in nature and the arts. And the other is a series about climate change authors who, that's just kind of a broad way to describe that, because a lot of authors who include climate change in their works really identify their genre with science fiction or like Solarpunk or one of the punks but they don't really talk about the label as much as we're talking about their story. So I think that's interesting as well. I know that you're going to probably ask about Dragonfly next, so I'll hold off on that thought. But yeah, it's just a growing site, and people are submitting their books. They're submitting some guest topics. I just posted yesterday a review that somebody else wrote because I don't have time to do reviews. So I would encourage anybody listening that if you look at the database and don't see a book there that should be there, you can just email me. Or if you want to guest post or write something for the site, as long as it's relative to environmental fiction, I will post that as long as it's well written. So I do encourage people to get involved with the site and not just use it as reference, kind of jumping off site, but get involved, read the interviews, contribute if you want.
Oh, that's so cool. And one of the parts of the site that I really enjoyed, I loved the interviews. You've got to go to the site and see these interviews that Mary has put together. It's such an amazing curated list of information and interviews. So that was definitely a highlight. But also I really liked her tab at the top of the site that says dig deeper. And she has all kinds of things like music and film and all kinds of things. So
yeah.
And you're right. I am going to ask about dragonfly.eco next. So tell us more about that.
A lot of people had been wanting kind of a place that went beyond fiction into nonfiction and poetry. And there's a little bit of that already at Ecofiction, but I wanted to have a separate place that was even a little bit more interactive. And I had been thinking about it for a long time. And I also wanted it to be a more, a site that would go beyond just, it's funny because at Ecofiction, I do cover novels that are written from authors all around the world and are set all around the world. But oftentimes I find in media that if a lot of the news articles about this literature are set in either North America or Europe, which is fine. But I think a lot of it is written by, and I mean, I don't think all of it, but I will say for myself, as an author, I've come from a really privileged life. And I think a lot of us do. And it's good that we're concerned about everything on the planet that's going wrong, not just about the environment, but about the unfair, refugee crises, the terrible treatment toward people of different races and gender and sexual orientations. And so it's good to have anybody on board, right, to fight for an egalitarian world that's clean and renewable. but I wanted to find more stories set on places that weren't where I recognized, So that was part of the concept behind Dragonfly and the new series that I'm doing, which is Global Ecofiction. And even though Ecofiction, the other site, has all of that, it's, we're talking a database of almost 600 books. So what I wanted to do was kind of focus on a place that would be a little bit more interactive and for everyone. And secondly, that it would kind of host this global area where I'm looking at world literature from around the world and giving a more equal space to different countries than the small sample that you might see at Ecofiction, and just zooming out, bringing that in over at Dragonfly.
Very cool. And there's also a writer's workshop through Dragonfly, right?
Oh yeah, Dragonfly is a reference site too, but the two sub-sites, there's a writer's workshop and a Dragonfly library. The library is works that I had been collecting over at Ecofiction, and I decided to move them over to a real library shelf space, because what that is authors get to send in samples of stuff that they've published, and just small samples, and then it's a free way for them to promote their stories. And then another way for the reader, it's like a good way to kind of sample some environmental fiction and nonfiction and poetry. The writer's workshop is, when I imagined it, I thought, well, maybe people would want to actually use it as a place to get feedback on their writing. And that's happening a little bit, but not that many people are participating in it. And so I'm just thinking, whatever, it can be whatever the participants want it to be. So if people don't want to come and share their writing and get critique, then it's going to at least be a place to get reference for writers. So I have writers' tips. I have, and not just from myself, but from other people like Ursula K. Le Guin and Jeff Vanderbeer. And there's also a place to find contest events, submission callouts for this kind of literature. And then the Global Ecofiction series is there. And I wanted to host it from that site to kind of try to draw in more people. But it also gives writers and readers kind of a wider perspective of the global novel and how important it is for us to look at different places in the world outside of our space, because a lot of us aren't really seeing much yet in terms of climate change or the kind of, trickle down or upstream, downstream effect, I guess, that it will have. Whereas a lot of other places definitely are seeing it worse than we are. So if you want to get involved, you can go there and register. And there's instructions at the site on how to register. I think there's a little bit of, when you register for something and then you get an email and it goes to your spam folder. I think that's maybe one of the barriers, but I don't know how to get around that other than to say check your spam folder. But once somebody registers, as soon as I, kind of look into it, know that they're not a bot or something, then I'll promote them to contributor, and they can actually make their own posts there. They can join a chat. They can use a private messaging system. And I have had one hosted chat where we've had about half a dozen people come, and we've just talked about this literature, and it was kind of fun. But in another way, it's just like another space on the web where you're trying to promote and do social media. And I think there's a lot of noise there already. So, but I'll just be patient and let people know that it's there if they want to come and use it, that it's there and it's free, and come on.
Yeah. And see how it goes. That's so cool. Okay. Well, next, I would love to talk about your blog. So in addition to everything we've talked about so far, you also have these beautiful pictures. And do you have anything to share about your blog?
Only that I started it as a running blog because a few years ago, I did the Couch to 5K program. And then I'm not a big runner, like I've never even run a half marathon, but I was getting up to 10K, and then I was getting into trail running and more getting out into nature and running, and less competitive, race running. But I had so many good experiences on the trail when I thought about writing and family and memories. So the blog just kind of covers all these thoughts. I haven't been as active on the blog lately. I've been maybe posting once or twice a month. I have a problem with my left foot and ankle that's continuing. So if I get out and run, I'm very kind of klutzy because I lose balance easily. But I'm hoping to get back into it soon. But I'm still blogging there. And I did change the name of the blog from Running Blog to the Waters in the Wild, which is a nod, of course, from Yeats. But yeah, if you ever want to get kind of some more personal thoughts about what I'm doing, I guess it would be a good place to read.
Very cool. Well, good luck with the foot problem. I'm with you
Thanks.
on the track to
Oh,
rehabilitation.
yeah, good luck with you too. I didn't even realize.
Yeah, I had knee surgery, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
just been an intense one for me. So right now I'm doing the physical therapy to walk and stuff again, but I miss it. I miss the outdoors the most.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I haven't. I mean, we go on hikes and stuff, but I haven't been doing any running. Like for about a month, I haven't run at all. But
Yeah.
I hope that you feel better. A couple of my cousins actually have gone through that knee surgery stuff. And that's hard.
It kind of sneaks up on you out of nowhere.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Okay, so I'd love to also point listeners to your press. Now, I want to be clear that moonwillowpress.com is not accepting submissions right now, but there are resources there. For example, the one that stood out to me is the 2018 Summer Reading Program. So there are free books every weekend, correct?
Yeah, Kindle downloads, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool because even when it's not the weekend, you can also go there and donate. By buying a book, you can donate part of the proceeds to Water, Trees, and People. Is that right?
Yeah, I take $1 off of for every print book over the summer, I donate $1 to Trees, Water, and People, and that goes directly into planting trees.
Very, very cool. And is there anything else we should know about their organization, or why did you choose them?
I actually used to go through a different organization called Ecolibris, and they did this thing where you buy a book and plant a tree. So I kind of worked with them for a while. They're no longer doing that tree planting thing. So I went with Trees, Water, and People because it was similar and that it's planting trees in very economically and ecologically depressed places. So they're not just planting a tree in the forest and that's it. They're actually planting trees for the local people in the area. So, and they're always native trees. They're never any other kind of tree. And they also work with local people who are hurting to get them to learn how to plant trees and use trees for their benefit, such as like a fruit tree would provide fruit. And so I wanted to do something like that would benefit as many things and people as possible. And these programs are just awesome. I would check them out for sure.
Very cool. Well, okay, so we've covered a lot of ground because Mary's doing so much, but anyone listening may be interested in additional communities or initiatives you're working on or with. Is there anything that I've missed in covering some of your projects?
No, I do have a list of references, but I did promise a quote earlier on in the
Yes.
Yeah, because I think there might have been another question that maybe I didn't get around to it. But as far as storytelling, there's another artist, John Luther Adams. I don't know if you've heard of him. He composed this music piece called Ocean, and he's a Pulitzer Prize and Grammy-winning composer. So he wrote this article in Making Music in the Anthropocene that nature compels him to make art, and in this case, music. But I think that this is a really good advice for authors who are writing environmental fiction. He said, as a composer, I believe that music has the power to inspire a renewal of human consciousness, culture, and politics, and yet I refuse to make political art. More often than not, political art fails as politics, and all too often it fails as art. To reach its fullest power, to be most moving and most fully useful to us, art must be itself. And I just thought that was a powerful statement, and I thought it was a good advice for writers as well.
Yeah, especially in such a cause-driven area as this can be. I think
Yeah.
that's really relevant.
Yeah.
And it's really also interesting to think about it in the context of my last question for you today. As we head further into 2018, what would you like to see more of or less of, or, maybe just different when it comes to, ecopunk, solarpunk, also just eco fiction?
Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of critique. I mean, I think that's where that quote was, because I think it just, as authors, we need to remember that when we're writing. But I don't really have a lot of critique about seeing more or less of anything. What I'm seeing is really beautiful. Um, Solar punk, especially, is just, I mean, a couple years ago, I noticed people nixed it from Wikipedia because it just wasn't happening, but it is happening. And it's not just a literary genre like the other punks. It's really a bigger movement. It's kind of an aesthetic that people are looking at as far as architecture, art, um, and other fashion, even, and other technology. So, for instance, if you go to the Reddit, you can find a whole very active subreddit on Solarpunk, and that would get me to those other references. That was one of them, but medium.com has a great solar punk reference. Tumblr crowd has a big solar punk following. If you go to Twitter and just hashtag solar punk, there's a lot. And then also I sat in a few years ago on SFF World, which stands for Science Fiction Fantasy World. And if you search there, they also have a panel that I sat in with Adam Flynn and some other people just talking about solar punk, not funk.
That'd be cool too.
Yeah, I mean, a little depressing, maybe. Solar punk.
Well, thank you so much. And it is really interesting to think, like, do all genres have to be the same or on a parallel with one another? It is possible that some of these punk genres, like solar punk and ecopunk, they cross into other spaces of
For
endeavor.
sure. Yeah, that's why I mean, I'm not saying this about solar punk, but a lot of genres are just blurring now. And with new ways of describing literature, digitally, we are no longer on the one genre card catalog. So we have metadata. In the digital age, we can describe literature in many ways. My friend once said science fiction is becoming a love story, and I loved that quote. And it's, there's a lot of genre blurring, and that environmental fiction really can take place in any genre. So I'm not big on branding, but I really do love the new solar punk and eco punk ideas, because punk is a resistance, and we're still in that resistance against the status quo to get away from fossil fuels and stuff. So we're still in the fight, and solar punk really speaks to that, I think.
I totally agree. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Okay, so truly, it can be difficult to wrap up a conversation that has gone to so many different areas, but I have learned so much from Mary. And again, I really appreciate her time and her expertise when it comes to solarpunk and ecopunk and all these wonderful things. And just by way of reminder, last episode, I told you all about this other thing I'm working on. So I have challenged myself, for better or worse, to have an autumn of 1,000,000 words. So I am speaking my writing because it's faster, it's healthier, gets me out into nature. And yes, this is something that I am documenting through video. So if you're interested in seeing that, once again, go to thedictationcoach.com. And you can find more resources if you are interested in learning about dictation, because the vlog, again, is not really a way to learn it. It's just more a way to get the vision and to see what is possible and why people are learning this. But to be honest, not very many people actually make it to the full dictation lifestyle or something that they stick with. And so for that reason, I'll just point you to the courses. I've been getting questions, and the best way to learn about the nitty-gritty for yourself and learning how is to go check out my courses. So again, you can go to speech2done.com, and that is the learning system that I've developed. I will be producing new courses like mad, and I'll be adding more to them through the coming weeks and on an ongoing basis, because there's so much content, and I'm so excited to share new skills with anyone who's signed up and interested and wants to jump into this world of dictation. Our next guest is truly amazing, so join me in 2 weeks. Until then, I'm sending you good vibes.